Good
Okay.
evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Hunter O'Hagan, the director of the Stonewall National Museum and Archive, located here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I want to welcome everybody here this evening. And I want to welcome our guest, Lou. Say hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited to be here.
Good. Well, we're so happy to have you here. And you and I have not met before this evening, so it's kind of nice to spend time with you. So where are we finding you tonight?
Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah. How long have
Chicago.
you been there?
Only 2 months. So
Yeah.
I just uprooted my life this year. I'm from Ohio and I've lived in Cleveland the last 6 years.
Right. Yes. No, I saw that on your bio that you've been in Cleveland for a while, and so we'll talk about what brought you to Chicago in a moment. But for those of you who don't know Stonewall, we've been around for 47 years. We're one of the largest LGBTQ archives in the United States. In our library, which they tell us is the largest in the world, if not the solar system, there are 28,000 volumes of queer fiction, nonfiction, biography, art, all organized under the Library of Congress system. And it's really sort of an amazing collection of gay books, queer books. It started actually on a very small shelf in a young man's house. He was 18 at the time in 1973. And the Stonewall Uprising had just happened a few years before. And so he had very liberal parents, and he came out as gay. His parents were very supportive, and so he called this bookshelf his Stonewall bookshelf. Now imagine 1969 is when Stonewall actually happened. So now we're talking 63, only 4 years after. Trust me, nobody knew outside of New York, what Stonewall was, but he really cared about civil rights in that way. I mean, he didn't have it in his mind that at one time a Black president of the United States would say from Stonewall to Selma to Seneca Falls to, have these amazing names. But anyway, that small collection of books on a bookshelf has turned into this amazing library. 28 books. And so we're open with COVID 6 days a week. We've been back in business for probably about 8 months. And then in addition, we have an archive, and the archive has 2,700 linear feet. And I didn't know what that meant when I first started working there. But if you go all the way up one side of the Empire State Building and all the way down the other side, that's 2,700 linear feet. And that represents about 6 million pages of queer history. The majority of it is from 1950 to the present day, although we actually do have things going back to the late 19th century as well too. But it's serials, periodicals, personal files, lots of stuff about very early gay organizations. There was this crazy guy here in Florida by the name of Joel Starkey, who started a serial Liberator that he was Xeroxing himself in the 1970s. And he sent them out to every gay organization he could find in the early 70s with a note that said, if I send you a copy of my publication, will you send me yours? Well, he amassed thousands and thousands and thousands of publications, and all of his stuff came into our archives as well. So what I love about that story is that what Joel brought us is all of these small zines and small publications, particularly through the American Southeast and the Midwest as well too, that the paper copies of those don't exist anyplace else except in our archive. And so this man had the foresight to ask for those things and actually do it in a barter basis, which really was nice as well too. And so that led to this amazing trove of papers. So in addition to that, we do exhibitions. We have one exhibition up right now, which is called Off Our Backs. And it's a look at early lesbian publications from 1950 to 2000. And what's nice about that is pulling some of those early lesbian publications, it's really interesting seeing how they were used in a very different way than some of the early male publications were. A lot of the male publications were around sexual objectification and gratification, but these were around topics around sexual identity. They were around politics. They were around creating community, fighting oppression. And so Megan Kent, who is curator here in South Florida, did an amazing job pulling all that stuff out. And so that show will be up for about another month. There is a virtual walkthrough through stonewall-museum.org. Or of course, you can come and see us in person. Then we're going to open a show next week called Don't Ask, Do Tell, which is a look at the US military's relationship with the LGBTQ community for 200 plus years. Not to go too far back, but we started with George Washington's lieutenant, who was an out man who helped build the first military in the United States. And then we end up with President Joe Biden allowing transgender individuals to serve in the US military. And of course, we have a big stop in the 80s and 90s where we talk about Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and what that meant to so many people. And we spend a fair amount of time in World War II, of course, because there was a lot of things and blue discharges and all those things that happened. So that exhibition, of course, is coming out of our archives. I'm very excited about it. The walls were being painted today. The vinyl lettering is on its way. Everything came back from the framers. And so we'll open that next Friday. And so please, if you have an opportunity, do stop by and see it. And I'm also happy because we're sort of in this post-COVID. Can I actually say that honestly? We're in COVID period. Oh my God, those words came out of my mouth for the first time. But with the CDC, what they said today, it's really kind of astonishing. But yes, we're going to have our first public opening. We can have up to 75 people. FYI, it is sold out, even though it's first come, first serve. But people are getting back and being to get together. And that's an amazing thing. But even if you're not able to come to see the show at the opening, we will, of course, continue to put virtual things online, and that will be important for everybody to see. To learn everything about us, all the stuff that I just said, and about 100 things more, you can go to stonewall-museum.org, and you can also sign up to get our weekly newsletter. I promise we won't ask for money too many times. And we do have a big membership drive going on right now. We're doing very well, but we do need your help. And memberships start at only $35. So it's a good thing to think about, supporting queer archives out there. And so you can find out everything about what we're doing. This virtual series we did start really with Esther Newton at the beginning of COVID a year ago. And this is probably episode number 42 or 43. And these are all archived and placed on our website. So if you have friends who are not able to be here right now, this is being recorded, and they will be able to find that. And we also will put it on Facebook and Instagram as well too. We have a lot of people who watch these shows on both of those channels as well too. So I think that's all of the stuff I have. I'm sure I probably forgot something, but so now let's go back to you, Lou. What do you have to tell us?
Well, first I want to say, I want to come.
Well, I want you to come.
Yeah. Like, what a great intro. I mean, well, it's like cool hearing, obviously with archiving queer history and collecting that, there's so much passion, but I really liked the person who was saying, here's this, so can I, and then send something back. And I've been thinking a lot with writing, I want to get better and better at being like, ooh, they're going to be big, like reading someone's zine or someone's like little book and like, oh man, and like collecting those, like how artists collect work. That's an interesting thing to think about. Yeah. But I have a publishing company. Go ahead.
Yes, I think I've heard about that. I've heard that. So we're finding you in Illinois, and you grew up in Ohio. Where in Ohio did you grow up?
I grew up in Brunswick, Ohio, which you probably have not heard of. It's about 40 minutes south of Cleveland. It's a conservative suburb. Let me think of something exciting to say. There's like 15 pizza places there.
There you go, right? All right, so in Brunswick, when was the first time you realized you were queer?
when I was watching Married with Children, I was 9 years old.
Was it Kelly? You loved Kelly?
Seagal, the mom.
The mom? Oh, the
Yeah.
mom did it for you. Oh,
Yeah.
that's good.
I
Yeah.
just loved, and I honestly don't really remember the show at all, but I remember she like used her sexuality as like a powerful, like a tool.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's hot. You know, I don't know what I said at 9. I was like, and I remember I asked my aunt, is it okay to like girls? However I phrased it, it was like, you know, something like that. And or is it okay to look at girls or look at women? And she's like, yeah, as long as you don't want to do anything or don't want to be with them, something like that. And I was like, okay. And then when I was in middle school,
she's the one who put the idea into your head of doing something with them, because all you wanted to do was look at the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Then I was like, oh, I got to rebel. And I did in high school. But so then I started taking the quizzes in middle school, like, are you gay? Am I gay? And it was inconclusive.
Excuse me. I was born in 1955. I went to school in the 1960s. There were no quizzes that said, are you gay? The only quizzes, whether they were from public school or Catholic school, was, are you a sinner? It was in
Oh,
yeah.
That makes sense.
But
yeah, and it was interesting because they almost all said I was bi-curious.
Yeah.
But it seemed to be operating from, you're at least straight. Like it was kind of like saying that's the starting point. So then I was deviating, but I was like 10, or no, would have been like 13. So I like hadn't slept with either sex at that point.
Right.
And so I was like, just kind of liking, I don't know. I don't remember what they said, but it, to me now thinking about it, the bi-curiosity doesn't totally make sense, but.
Well, and of course we all grow up, whether, you know, like me growing up in the 60s or you growing up in the 90s, the aughts.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, when did I grow up? Yeah. I was born 91.
Yeah. So. All right. So yeah, into the 90s and the aughts there. But, you know, if we're queer, even in the queerest of households, we all grow up in a straight world. Mm-hmm. And so the idea in the beginning is always that's who you are.
Right.
And so we always have to fight our way out of that little bubble.
Right.
And sometimes it's easy. And then other times it's more difficult, of course, as to what they're doing. Yeah. So, yeah. So you grew up in rural Ohio or quiet.
I wouldn't say rural. It was like what do you call it?
Middle class?
Yeah, middle class. It ranged from working class to upper class, but middle class was
suburban.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Applebee's.
Yeah. Where did you go to college?
I went to college at Kent State, which a lot of people know Kent State because of May 4th. Yeah, so that was like 40 minutes away from my hometown. Oh, you cut out.
So
you cut out for a second, so you might have.
So I'm kind of curious. We are breaking up a tad. I think it's just because of the weather we're having here, but we'll get through it. So a quick question about that stop. So was there any burden or history going to Kent State, given Kent State's role in the Cultural Revolution of the late 60s and early 70s?
Did I feel a burden?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I don't really think I thought about that. My dad went to Kent State. Like, I guess I'm saying I thought about it. It didn't affect me personally going to Kent State. But my dad was a big, considered himself a hippie, loved Neil Young, loved art. And he had a great time with me going to Kent. Because he was like reliving a lot of his youth in a way. We went to a protest that they had during May 4th when I was in high school. And they did one like annually at that time. And that was really interesting. But I I thought about it, but I think it took me like until after college to really start putting like a historical context around my own identity. I don't really, I was, the bubblings were happening in college, but.
Yeah. Well, and of course, you know, from historically, from a countercultural standpoint, there are those around somebody like me who grew up in New England and Rhode Island, but it's probably the same age as your parents that, you know, the idea of four dead in Ohio, you
Mhm.
know, on my deathbed, I will still know those lyrics. I mean, Kent
Mm.
State just had such a huge impact. And it's funny too, when we're seeing all of this unrest today, you know, it, I guess we will see another Kent State happen. We will
Mm.
see a situation in which the police will get completely out of control like they did there at that time. It's a sad thing for me to actually say, but in a funny
Mhm.
way, we're kind of like waiting for that to happen again.
Mhm.
At least I am, because I don't
Yeah.
have enough belief in the system that's going on right now. I have belief in people who are trying to change it, but I think the system is still flawed enough that
Mhm.
something awful like that could really happen
Right.
again.
Hasn't it already happened? Or
Yes,
do you mean in the sense that someone dying at a being killed by a police officer at a protest?
yes. I mean, specifically, that's
Yeah,
specifically what I'm saying. Of course,
right.
everything Ferguson and everything that's been going on there is really, but is really very big and very important. But
Mm-hmm.
imagine, I can imagine us today in a situation in which police will actually open up fire on protesters in this
Mm-hmm.
country, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that will happen. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I guess the closest that we've seen to it is, and I'll get off this track in a minute, but the idea of seeing those people, even though they weren't government employees per se, they were sanctioned by one person in the government, but seeing those people in the insurrection taking over the Capitol,
Right.
I mean, that's pretty intense. And so,
Mm-hmm. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It feels like in many ways we've kind of surpassed like what happened in May 4th, you
yeah.
know, although that specific thing hasn't happened in the exact way, but I think people still get beat up by police officers at protests and,
Oh,
you know,
oh,
time.
completely. And it's and there's no excuse for any of that stuff. Of course, we can talk about that stuff forever, and it's very important. For those of you who are here, but by the way, throw your questions into the chat or into the Q&A, and we'll be getting to those as well too. So after Ohio State, where'd you go? What'd you do?
Um, then I moved to Lakewood, which is a suburb near Cleveland. And it's funny, people in Brunswick, I think Lakewood was like the Paris of Ohio. Like we were like, oh my God, whenever we get out of Brunswick, we're going to move to Lakewood. um, and Lakewood wasn't a great fit for me. And then I moved to the east side of Cleveland, and then that's where I stayed pretty much until I moved. And it was and then I was kind of bouncing from job to job. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I got an English degree in college, and I was into poetry a lot in college.
Who were some of your favorite poets in college?
I really liked Heather Crystal,
Oh, oh,
um, and it's funny. I still totally respect her. She's great. I'm not gonna say it, but her poetry doesn't resonate with me now in the way it did in college. I revisited it recently. I also got really into Allen Ginsberg in college. I feel like he was informative on a lot of the way I think about art and especially with thinking about my work as a publisher and his book being banned. And I think about that a lot now. This is kind of a tangent, but people are really like, that idea is scary, the idea of books being banned, and like we don't want that to happen. And I think a lot of times now it's people are canceled or like rid of in that way. And sometimes it feels like the same people who think the idea of banning a book is like terrible are also the people who are like get them off the internet. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
yeah, they're trying to quiet those voices that
Mm-hmm.
don't agree with them, even though they even though they want to say politically, they want everybody to have a right to be heard.
Right.
So you sort of dropped the idea there about being a publisher. So yeah, so Condé Nast, is that who you are? How? Yeah, I was looking about the Purple Palm Press,
Mm-hmm.
and I read some story, some interview with you, and I loved the idea that you said it was something I could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Here we are in whatever year that you started the press, and of course, what I've gleaned from what I've read is the idea that you wanted to create the opportunity for voices to be heard, both
Mm-hmm.
creative and activist voices to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that you thought you could be a participant in that, and actually to provide leadership, is to create a publishing house,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of interesting. Where'd you get the chutzpah to do it?
It's interesting because so the idea, it was something I could do. Was initially I really wanted to had this dream of being a showrunner in Hollywood and creating TV shows. And then I was like, that sounds huge, and would require me to uproot my life and move, and I don't know. And I was like 24 and I didn't have the confidence I do now. But I was like, what is something I could do here? Like in Ohio, a publishing company. Like, I mean, it's like an incredibly different industry, but I also loved books, loved writing. I mean, in a lot of ways, it makes sense in that way. And I love design, but it just was like, what's something where I wanted to be like in the producer kind of role, and not just in the artist role. And so that was part of it too, where like, I was like, that sounds like I would spend 20 years trying to do that in Hollywood. And that's a totally great move but I just didn't, I was like, what can I do? And so it's interesting because it didn't really feel like it took that much chutzpah to do. Because I was like, well.
You weren't born in late May or June sometime, were you?
No, are you asking if I'm a Gemini?
Because you're being very clear. You're putting forward a lot of Gemini traits.
That's funny. I'm a Gemini rising.
Oh,
so
well, there you go.
I have some Gemini. I'm a Virgo,
Okay.
which I think makes sense in other ways. The work, obsession.
So you started Purple Palm Press in what year?
I started it in 2018, and I'm wondering, can you guess why it's called Purple Palm Press?
Yeah, that question is right here. Tell us why it's called. That's right here. I ain't guessing.
Yeah, so it's queer. There's a queer history element to the name. So I wanted to pick something that was somehow rooted in queer history, but I wanted it to be kind of like a deep cut, so that like not everyone would know, but like maybe you'd know. And I was looking up different symbols in the queer history, and people talk about like the purple hand.
Yeah.
And I always tell myself to look up the year, and I never do. I believe it was 1969. There was a newspaper in San Francisco that was publishing anti-gay rhetoric, and a gay liberation group went to the newspaper to protest, and then people working at the newspaper dumped ink on them, and then they started putting their hands all over the wall, and then it was purple hands, and wrote like gay power and everything. And I liked it because it felt like something that made sense for a publisher to resonate with. And in that case, it was like they were publishing anti-gay work. But I think from what I remembered, there was also a censorship element. And I'm really interested in not censoring people, and especially like not censoring queer people to other queer people, like this kind of like policing of each other and like what's okay to say and what's not okay to say. But yeah, and I love alliteration, and I didn't want to call it like purple hand publishing or something.
Right.
So Purple Palm Press is what.
Yeah, so of course all those things really work. I mean, the alliteration, of course, as a writer definitely works in there, and then the historic part. I will be honest, I don't know about the the incident that you brought up in San Francisco in 1968. I'm certainly going to look it up tomorrow and find out about it. But I love the idea, and also I love the idea about the idea of those palm prints and those handprints as being a metaphor for publishing as well too. And not even a metaphor, it's you're actually publishing something when you put your handprints, your things there. And so it is even more literal than a metaphor. And so that has a lot of meaning to me. And so to place it there. So you started in 68 and in 2018. How many titles do you have?
I have 7.
Good. Yeah.
So I have some of them with me. We're in the middle of getting reprints. It's called The Breakup Book, and it's queer essays on queer breakups.
Yep.
I was interested in this because I think breakups are usually always put in like the negative category. And I think a lot of gay media queer stuff can tend to focus on, or at least did, the like love and like, look, where our relationships are great, but like we're so great at relationships and everything. And I think there's less room for us to show the things that we like struggle with, and like have that space with each other to be like, sometimes we like screw up, you know, and sometimes we like suck at stuff. And so I wanted to have the space for that. So it's very cool, beautiful. There's 14 pieces in here, and yeah, all by queer people. And then I also did my own series called Pen Dive. There's 5 total. They're like flash fiction.
Yep.
And it centers around a character named Pen Dive. And it was kind of like me trying to write a show that I would want to see. That was kind of how it started. And it's interesting because I started writing this like almost 5 years ago now. And so much of it, like it can feel kind of horrifying that for people to still read it. But it was me kind of like working out a lot of my relationship drama on paper.
Sure.
You know, and trying to make sense of it. And still feeling kind of like victim-y and like, oh, poor me. And that definitely comes through in here. But I'm very proud of it. And the most recent thing we put out, what is called Recording Corona. So it's not totally aligned with our mission, but because of everything that was going on, I was like, let's, you know, do something. And a friend, Elaine Schleifler, who is from Cleveland and is a community organizer, brought up the idea to me. And we did kind of a live journal style blog on the website for people to submit real time what they were going through during the pandemic. And then we would post them immediately. And then we released an anthology of those.
Great. Well, you know, I have to say, I have not looked to see what titles of yours of Purple Palm Press we have at the library, but I will check tomorrow. And then I'm going to send you an email to say, please send us so that we have a complete collection in the library as well, too, because we'd like to be able to have them there. Taking a little step back, though, I think of you, it's part of what my question was about whether you were Gemini, but I think of you as being in some way related to being a bit business person, somebody who wants to run things. That's part of your personality. And to be a publisher, one has to want to do that. But then also you are very creative. And I, of course, knew that you were a writer and a poet, but it's also nice to know about your interest in design as well, too. Of course, those are very important creative aspects there. But so in your life right now with the press, as you have your hands on those levers of control, administration, and operation versus the creative side of what's going on, how is that tension happening with you right now?
That's a great question.
What's that like? Yeah, what's that like? Because it takes a lot on a day-to-day basis to navigate that.
Yeah, and right now over the winter, I signed our first 2 big authors, which is super exciting. Their books will be coming out in 2 years, and they're going to be incredible. And I would say part of the work I'm doing with them and helping develop the books feels creative. But as far as my own writing, it feels tabled often. I have a book idea, and have you read any Maggie Nelson?
Yes.
Okay. In Bluettes, she like talks throughout, is kind of making this joke about how she was talking about how she was writing Bluettes for like 2 years before she started writing or something.
Yep.
And this book idea I've had for a year. I wrote a page in like December, kind of trying to mess with it, and haven't. But I want to write something about my non-binary identity and what I am calling the double bind of queer femininity. Are you familiar with double binds?
I'm not.
So psychiatrist or psychologist came up with the idea, and it was initially, the context was around schizophrenia. But the idea is that a double bind is when you have two messages that are given to the same person, and they conflict. If you follow one, you're not doing the other. And people talk about this in a lot of ways related to different oppressed communities. And with queer femininity, I think a lot of the messaging for feminine people is look as close to like straight heterosexuality, high femininity as possible, be as like conventionally attractive as possible. And then the other messaging is like grow out your armpit hair and be as queer as possible, like, you know, cut your hair, look like edgy, look queer. But you're always doing something wrong, you know. Right. No matter what you do. And I think a lot of, at least the people I've talked to about this who have had similar experiences, resonate with it. And I'd like to kind of explore that idea more through creative nonfiction. But it is tabled. But I do get a lot out of working with the authors that I'm working with. And I don't know if there are other publishers who take the approach I'm taking. I'm sure there are some, right? I'm not going to be like that arrogant. But we right now meet once a week. So I'm being a big part of the brainstorming process, which it's just like incredible. But also I'm really interested to see how it affects the books that come out when there's like this much of like having that sounding board, and not just because anyone who was writing a book, they probably have sounding boards in their life, but that sounding board being the publisher, because so much of the publishing industry, there's this like publisher against author, this kind of like idea, and Amazon, I think, had a lot to do with that idea. But what if the publisher and the author are a lot more like this, you know, and what are the books that come through as a result of that? Which I do think a lot of publishers, the process is more like this in terms of the relationship, but I'm really interested in being a part of the book development process.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because I mean, from my own personal experience, I think that those that are in, to use the analogy here of the publisher role, as opposed to the creative role, those that are most successful at it are those that have the authority as being the ones who are going to make something happen, who are the most collaborative. So if you think about theater, or if you think about publishing, or you think about composition, or you think about curation, museums, the most successful ones are the ones who can actually be in partnership with the artist. The curator or the conductor or the publisher, they have to try to shepherd the creative process with somebody else. They have to be a real participant in the process, but yet they have to put part of their own ego aside and allow the creative talent to actually be there and to go forward. And that's what makes those of us as curators and publishers and enablers, and I mean enabling in a very positive way, but you know, creativity does take midwives to make this happen, and we can be incredibly helpful in making it happen.
That's cool. I actually have a dream of one day being a doula as well, so it's interesting. It was funny that you said midwife.
I have an acquaintance who recently decided he was going to be a death doula, and I thought, well, that's
I actually want to do that too. I think that's
okay.
really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a whole thing that's happening there as well too. Anyway, is the press more traditional paper? Is it online? Tell us. I mean, I see the printed books that you have there, but what's your focus?
So right now it's all paper. And when I started Purple Palm Press, I said I would never do anything online. I may have been lying. I don't know if I'm gonna maintain that. I am thinking about offering ebook versions of things, but selling ebooks and selling print books, it's just like they're not two different industries, but they're two totally different ways of selling books and require like two totally different understandings of bookselling. But I'm open to doing that. But right now, but print first.
Yeah. Do you think that you have a love for for the object of having the thing in your hand? I mean, I know I do. I love having the thing that, whether it's hardbound or soft cover, whatever it is, it's appropriate. I like having the object in my hand.
I do too. Although I'm 29, I'm really not an internet person. I don't know. I'm not a big internet person. But anyway, I went to Women and Children First yesterday for the first time in Chicago. And I was thinking while I was in there that it felt like I was in an art museum. Like bookstores really feel like art museums to me. And that's so much of it for me too, that there's just something like, I mean, they're just beautiful, in a way that looking at something on a screen doesn't give you that same feeling.
No, I mean, and I don't know if that's something intrinsic within certain of us within the species, but there seems to me, at least for me personally, there's some kind of visual reaction to having something in my hand like that, as opposed to something on the screen. Well, I know you prepared a few things to read, and so maybe this might be a good time for us to have you read something that you've selected. I don't have any idea what that might be.
Yeah.
Left at this point, but maybe we might use it as an opportunity for you to read something.
Sure. I was talking about how Pendive. I'm multitasking because I'm pulling it up.
Sure.
I was talking about how Pendive feels like a kind of a past self wrote it. And one of the pieces I'm writing, I feel that way about, but it's still one that I really enjoy reading. Because it's fun. So I'm going to read that. I guess it's kind of like short prose. Like I think of it like a poem because I perform it like a poem, but I don't know that I would call it a poem. And it's called Marital Clock.
Do I need to know anything before you read this?
I would rather you didn't.
Thank you.
But I would love to talk a little bit about some of the ideas in it after. Okay. I got it. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. And I wrote this for context. I wrote this like a month before I started Purple Palm Press. So in 2018. Okay, marital clock. My marital clock is ticking. Not long ago, I thought I never wanted to get married. Too patriarchal, too hetero. Now I've become kind of obsessed with the idea. I want someone to see taking care of me as a legal obligation. I want commitment by contract. I'm aroused by duty and devotion. Devote yourself to me. I'll get a fancy pen for us to sign our names to each other. What's yours is mine. What's mine is yours. You are mine and I am yours. I'm not good with possessions, human or non. I'd like to nix that part. We'll be individualistic individuals, but take care of each other and try to make reigniting the passion a fun game. I've forgotten what it's like to get to the part of the relationship where sex is boring and you have to try new things. I want that. Bore me orgasmless, pick fights with me over what we're having for dinner. Monotony marriage makes, make me miss myself by myself. I want to do the work of a marriage. Let's do our taxes together like the successful business our relationship is. Our house, our storefront adorned in a collection of your favorite things. Your taste has always been good, but never better since I came along to egg you on. Carry my fictitious children, maybe. I'm not sure I want a baby, but I'd never be able to deny you of your dreams. We just have to get rich first. I've liked this a lot less since motherhood got involved. Maybe tomorrow. Make my mom more bearable. You'll like her. She's funny. Your mom will scare me. Hold my hand in the car and shove it off in a fight. I want your love before it's denied. I want to kiss so much that our lips locking is like tying your shoes or brushing your teeth or doing the dishes or setting your alarm clock. I'm the big spoon, but sometimes brave enough to be the little spoon. I'll be tender for you if you'll be tender for me. Just promise me you'll never stop telling me how good my pussy tastes.
Well, as you said, that was written and delivered like a poem, and it was really beautifully done. Beautifully done.
Thanks.
All right, so you want to talk about this, and it goes to the question for me about assimilation. And of course, I know assimilation is something that, yes, is something that you can feel about. And so, again, I am going to play a little bit of the intergenerational card here. But for those of us who are in our 50s and 60s and 70s, I'll speak only personally, we were completely opposed to marriage because we didn't want to participate in this institution and this patriarchy, this convention that was so embedded. I mean, forget about its sexism, and all the religiosity that's there. But who wanted to be invested in that convention? And so we came up with things and ways to have relationships that, quite frankly, had every single thing that you just talked about in that poem. I mean, again, I'm only speaking personally in the sense that I've had a partner who is legally my husband now, but I've had a partner for 30 years who the relationship was exactly what you described. And right down to the fights about, what we're going to have for dinner or, what a particular kiss means. And I do think it's an amazing thing. I mean, I can only talk about it on my side of being outside of assimilation and then now being in assimilation. But what I find so fascinating about the gay community is if there could be any community of 40 million people. Right. I guess that's possible. But how people have just sort of dove into legalized marriage. And again, I'm with you 100% in the sense that, it raises my eyebrows about the assimilation for us to get married. But all those beautiful, wonderful things that you spoke about, I can testify that those are certainly possible between two human beings who just happen to be queer.
That makes sense. And I think when I wrote that, which I do want to get married, but I think that time in my life, I felt I was very thought, once I get married, once I get someone to commit to me in this way, I'll feel okay. And I don't feel that way anymore. But I was very kind of obsessed with finding a long-term partner at the time. And so that's part of where that came from. Oh my gosh, there was something else. Oh, and I also want to make sure, just in case my future spouse, who I haven't met yet, is watching, I actually do want kids now. I didn't want them then, but everybody needs to know.
And listen, that's a perfect good thing to change your mind about. I know that when I was in my early 30s, I wanted kids too. And then there was a long period later into my 40s that I didn't want kids at all. And now in my 60s, sure, I'd love to have an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
I'd love to have somebody responsible to be an heir.
Yeah.
But we get to choose those things
Right.
as
well, and assimilation is something I thought a lot about with Purple Palm Press, because I think that assimilation has had a lot of like lasting effects on the queer community in terms of how they see themselves. And I think a lot with, I'm going to go a little bit on a tangent, but are you familiar with Tori Peters? Did you read Detransition Baby? Okay. I'm obsessed. And I think she's incredible. I've listened to her talk on like 5 podcasts in the last 2 days. I'm doing a deep dive. And a lot of people with Tori Peters were like, I've heard, and she's talked about in the podcast, felt like, oh, she's giving insider secrets. This is bad. She's like exposing parts of the queer community. And I've wondered, with the people who are saying that and of those who are artists, do you feel, so if you're saying that, are you saying that all of the art and the work you create is work that is safe for a straight audience, that you've decided you're comfortable with a straight audience seeing? And if that's the case, is that the kind of art you want to make? Maybe it is, but I'm like, why is it a wrong thing? Why is it a bad thing if someone is selling a best-selling novel that's sharing secrets? Why are they secrets? And I think a lot of this stuff comes back to what is the long-term effects an assimilationist approach to gay liberation has had, where we're like straight people, we want the same things, we need the same things. And so now we see someone who's being different in some way, and we go, no, don't show them that. Don't let them know there's any problems with who we are, like, because then we might like lose stuff. It so much feels rooted in a fear. At least
yes, it is a position which is taken from insecurity, and of being outed in another way, that there's something about you internally, not you, but about those that have that situation. I mean, I've seen some of that stuff recently, and I don't give it too much credence, simply because of the fact that I think for all of us who are making things and participating, for me, it's like we have to do what's honest for us. And I'm not an evangelist, but I'm also not going to be the kind of guy who's going to worry about telling some kind of secrets, because my life and our lives are wonderful things. I think they should be shared, and so I don't think I'm letting any cats out of the bag here. So take it for what it's worth. Be part of the journey. Take whatever pieces can be helpful to you, and you use them whatever way. But I'm not going to be shy about saying who I am, for somehow breaking the code, or let other people into the club, because that doesn't worry me. It doesn't worry me that much. So, but to get into the assimilation thing, and I want to sort of, just because I like alliteration like you do, but let's talk about activism and assimilation, and those two words together. You do describe yourself as an activist, and that's a word that you use. And you also seem to fight assimilation. So tell me where that Venn diagram fits for you. Tell me what that's all about for you personally.
I don't know that I did identify as an activist. I don't know if I do now, only because I guess I just don't know that what I'm doing is something that everyone considers activism. But I am really interested in What did you say?
Do you consider yourself an activist? Do you consider yourself an activist?
Right. Identity doesn't feel super important to me. So I guess sure, it doesn't feel important to, but I would say I'm trying to have a real impact on improving queer people's lives. So, and I'll go on another note, a tangent kind of. One of the reasons I started Purple Palm Press, and one of the reasons I think I got into queer, if you call it activism work, was because in 2010, I read a CDC findings document about statistics in the queer community of intimate partner violence. And I haven't found a more recent study than that, but the numbers were really scary. And I was 18 and feeling like, wow, cool. You know, like this is what I have to look forward to, kind of thing. And I'd already experienced some of that myself in high school, in queer relationships. And then the older I got and the more I was exposing myself to queer media, the more I felt like there was this like, yeah, it's bad. Here's how things are bad. Yep, we deal with oppression. Here's how the oppression looks. And I just was like, what are the solutions? What do we do about it? How do we fix these things? And a lot of my hope with Purple Pond Press and what I'm working toward is publishing people who are talking about the things that are happening in the queer community and have happened that are difficult to talk about, and talking about how we do something about it, instead of just this like obsession with like the oppression stuff, like obsession with this is bad, it's bad. It's like, okay, now what? And what happens when queer people are offered like more hope and solutions and ideas for how to change, instead of constant just like validation and feedback about like, yeah, you're right, it does suck.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think I wonder how much of that strife that you're talking about might be generational or situational for a group of individuals, as opposed to their queerness as well too. Because I do think in your generation, there are, whether individuals are queer or not, there are a lot of people who feel that they're born and living in a situation that sucks. They feel like, you know, there are no jobs. They feel like, you know, they're stuck with student debt. They feel like they can't live whatever baby boomer dream their parents had, and they feel like life sucks.
And what was the question? What do I?
Well, the question is, yeah. So the question for me sometimes is sort of the oppression part of things, or the fact that life sucks part of things. Is that about being queer, or is it simply about being part of a particular generation at a particular period of time?
It could be, and it could be a little bit of both. I do think that there is a lot of, work I've read and listening to people of many generations who just like, it's just kind of like the difficulty is what takes center stage. And I'm not trying to say it's not there and it doesn't exist, but I'm just like, I don't want to just be like mad and like everything sucks my whole life, you know? So,
right. Well, yes, of course.
But I'm also like, I just want to kind of like explore these things that I feel like are like skated over, or like they're only really explored when they're glorified and romanticized. Like we're going to explore the abuse when it's like, you know, edgy and hot or something.
Yeah.
Instead of like, let's like talk about it. Because I think a lot of queer relationship issues, I think we're like unaware of what they even are, as well as like what are the pros of queer relationships, you know? And there's like some I'm familiar with, but like I want books that are really dedicated to those things specifically, so that people can have like a name for things.
Yeah. And again, I think that's a big thing, in the sense that not being able to name it, but being able to feel it is really something which is important as well. We have a quick question here. Lou, if you could change one queer narrative in media, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. That's a good question. I mean, part of it would be like the it sucks narrative. Yes. I guess something that comes up for me a lot, and that this is just what popped in my head, I don't know if it counts as a queer narrative, but like the idea, I think there's a lot of this idea of like queer people aren't here to teach you stuff, but also we want you to do everything the way we want you to do it. And those feel conflicting to me. So I wish there was more of like, kind of like an understanding that people might not get everything off the bat, but it doesn't mean they're like total dicks. Like there's a difference between like a group of 20 people being like, teach us, and cornering a person, and just having like a one-on-one conversation where someone's curious,
Right.
you know? I also think just that queer people, I don't know, I think sometimes queer people are framed as really infantile. And I would love if that changed, but there are of course like historical context for that, for why that is. And yeah, but I think sometimes it's like just kind of like all this, it's just like forever teenager.
Yeah. And I have to say personally, I don't see that, but I understand that that may be some people's perspective. A question for you: do you have any queer or straight mentors?
Yeah, I have a lot of mentors. I'm trying to think about the queer ones right now. I would say my queer mentors are people I haven't met.
Oh,
So like authors, Leslie Feinberg,
yeah.
Was reading So Much Blues was really huge for me. Maggie Nelson, right now Tori Peters. And I would say I have friends who are mentors, but I don't. What was really cool about doing the column I did, Respect Your Elders, for Autostraddle, was having one-on-one conversations with older queer people, because there are not a lot of times that you get that, have that experience. And I think there are stereotypes that are made about, my generation, and also like older generations of like 65 plus, that I think like a lot of what I hear about, the 65 plus group of queer people, is just doesn't make any sense to me. Just some of the kind of like, they're all TERFs or whatever. It's like, I don't really think that's true, but I think
it's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's just not true. Do you have one more quick thing to read?
Sure.
Yeah.
I will read. So I read Lou Sullivan's diaries. Have you read them?
No.
Yeah. So they're really cool. So I read his diaries, and he talked about the idea of resolving his male-female conflict. And that was something he was talking about. You're really like seeing kind of like the evolution of his ideas as he's transitioning, and just like getting older. And he was really talking about this idea of resolving the male-female conflicts. And he thought, if I can just resolve my male-female conflict, like everything will be fine, and like I'll feel normal. And I can just like be, at that time, a woman. And I really like the idea of instead saying embracing my male-female conflict, taking that idea and going in a different direction with it. So I wrote a piece called My Femininity Fits Fine. I actually wrote this the month that I changed my name to Lou. It's not my birth name, and came out. And I was thinking about kind of creating a series called Embracing My Male-Female Conflict. This is the only piece I wrote, but I may write more. Okay, yeah, this was written a week after I changed my name. So this is also from 2018. Today, I sold 3 dresses to my local hip thrift store. I really like 2 of the dresses. They're black lace, and I've felt sexy in black lace since high school. That's how long I've had them. I got it when I was 16, but grew into it more over the years. I wore it at a storytelling show during Pride Month the summer before I came out as non-binary. My story was about gender confusion and my love-hate relationship with femininity. I wore the dress proudly, knowing that I looked good. I sold them because they aren't Lou's. They belong to my old self. Lou would never wear those dresses because those dresses were bought to please other people. I still love dresses and skirts and will still wear them. They make me feel like I'm walking on clouds. I'm able to move easily and comfortably spread my legs. My body can sprawl out and move how it wants to without being constricted by denim or other fabric rubbing against my skin. I feel so much a part of my body in a long skirt because I notice and feel my body before noticing the skirt. The dresses I sold are lovely, yet at the same time, I bought each one to garner attention from someone I was attracted to. I learned their tastes, the kind of femininity they were drawn to, and was acutely aware of how different it was from the kind that I possessed naturally. Arousing others is a skill I've worked hard to refine. Eyes rolling down to my legs, lace overlay blending with my skin tone to create a peach that typically is a fair white. When eyes run down to my legs before meeting my own, I used to think I had won. I figured them out. I knew the part of me they wanted and how and when they wanted them. I climbed on top of dominant, conversation interrupting, strong armed, bossy people, mainly butch women in those dresses. I used my sexuality to assert dominance over them. I teased them just as they wanted me to until they begged for me. My self-education had taught me that how I wanted to look would never get the attention of those I desired, so I learned to conform in those ways. I still resisted makeup out of a disdain for consumerism and advertisements made with men in mind. I chose dresses that accentuated my curves, but not too much. My clothes couldn't give away that I wanted to have sex. They had to be just revealing enough that they would feel pushed to initiate. I played docile and only took their attention if they gave it, but never asked for it or demanded it. Not right away, at least. During my coming out process, I've taken emotional inventory over what I actually like as opposed to what I like because other people like it. Honestly, I don't know whether it's possible to completely separate and sift through every gendered interest and decide whether we authentically like it or whether society made us like it. However, we can come close, or at least can claim more ownership over our choices around how we present ourselves to others. That's how I figured out that I still like skirts and dresses. We're taught that androgyny is masculine leaning and that non-binary AFAB people who like skirts aren't trans enough or haven't figured it out. I resent the idea that the only way I can be seen as a self-realized trans person is by doing away with every feminine article of clothing I own and adopting masculine clothing. To be non-binary is to fall outside the lines. For me, that means that clothes are just clothes. Clothes are a great tool to express yourself. That said, to declare gender a lie means that on our bodies, any type of clothing can become gender neutral. Despite our cultural understanding that gender expression and gender identity are different, we still often decide who is or isn't trans based on the gendered meanings we have assigned to clothes. Because I'm AFAB and non-binary, people would likely take my identity more seriously if my gender expression aligned more with the opposite expectations of my assigned gender. That is the way I can be seen as gender nonconforming. I'm arguing that it's not so simple. Those expectations are binary as well and adhere to an assimilationist understanding of transness. This isn't about attacking trans masculine AFAB style. It's about being a femme person who kept trying to wash off their femininity to fit into a narrative that didn't feel right.
Wow, that's just so beautiful. And oh, I know, yeah. And it's just, God, you nailed so many issues so well in that. And it's just, and you know, you also attack, not attack because that sounds too harsh, but you address in a very real way so many topics relating to those issues that address that so many people are involved in. And it's also hard, you know, in the LGBTQ community, because there is so much bias against trans people, but then also we create these own ghettos about cisgender and trans, and we put the people in all these categories as do. And I think you do a beautiful job of being able to deal with gender in a very straightforward way, and something that I think many non-heteronormative people deal with, and they should feel empowered to be able to deal with it. And it's a great thing. Well, we've come, yes, no, you nailed it. We've come to the end, Lou Barrett. It's been great to see you. Your website again for Purple Palm Press is?
Yes, I'm actually putting my info in the chat. My Instagram is @LouBarrett. You can follow me there. And that's kind of what's updated the most. And Purple Palm Press is purplepalmpress.com.
Okay.
And I'm actually starting a book club in July that'll be virtual. People can find out about it on Purple Palm Press. You can also read more of my own writing on my website.
Right.
LouBarrett.com.
LouBarrett.com. And then I'm totally serious about this, that if your schedule ever allows you to come to South Florida, please come, and we would love to have you come in the archives and poke around and see what's there.
It sounds like a dream. I definitely want to come. I may try it for the fall.
Yeah, great. So just let me know. And for all of you, thank you so much for being here. Of course, this is being recorded and they will be posted, thrown up on Facebook and YouTube, as well as our website. And so thank you all. Lou, pleasure to talk with you. Hope you have a wonderful evening. And good night, everybody. I'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thanks, bye. It was so nice. Thank you.